So Donald Trump is the 47th president of the United States, and he starts out his tenure of his second term with a flood of disturbing executive orders and pardons. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's talk about this. So I was looking for a list, of uh, any news agency that would give provide like sort of a simple list of what Donald Trump's executive actions were today. And I had to go to the Economic Times of the India Times to find the list. I was kind of surprised that none of on Google search, none of the American news sources came up, and there were, I mean, they were there. There were the articles were there, but I mean, I needed a list. Like when something as sweeping happens as has happened with Donald Trump's executive actions, and you need to talk about them. It's good to have a list that you know regular people can go to and say, oh, okay. This is what he said he was going to do, and this is how he's implementing it. Because that's what I said that's what I started out talking about when I talked about Donald Trump's reign. Check out that episode, and that talks about a lot, not a lot, but some of the things that Donald Trump did today. So before you can find the sources of this list in the description box of this video. And I provided the article and also the White House Presidential Actions website that has the larger, more explained versions, or whatever, you know, rationales they give. It's all there in the presidential actions, and in that sense, there's transparency, the color of transparency. So let's go down this list. And so, number one, there was a symbolic memorandum directing federal agencies to combat consumer inflation. This was his I'll bring down the cost of living promise. How he's going to implement it, how federal agencies are going to implement it, he doesn't know. And that is probably still in the concept stages. Repeal Biden-era regulations to ease burdens on oil and gas production, particularly in Alaska. So we talked about that. He said drill, baby, drill, and this is what he gives. Promises to impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico starting February 1st, with plans for additional tariffs on Chinese imports left unspecified. Okay, then there's renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. I don't know how he thinks he can unilaterally do that and tell the world's maps and everybody that this is no longer it's the most absurd declaration. But he said he was going to do it, so he's going to do it. Reverted Denali's name back to Mount McKinley to honor American greatness. Sort of going back. I mean, these are some of them are just like hollow, and ordered flags to fly at full height for all future inauguration days, prompted by the lowering of the flags for Jimmy Carter's death. Reverse Biden-era immigration orders and reinstated Donald Trump's first term, prioritizing deportation of all undocumented individuals. Declared a national emergency at the Mexico border, deploying U.S. troops to support immigration agents and restrict refugees and asylum seekers. Promised to restart the requiring asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while awaiting U.S. hearings. Pledged to end birthright citizenship, and that change apparently they want to make by saying that these undocumented people who have American-born U.S. citizens were not or are not under the jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore their children are not afforded the citizenship clause's protection of birthright citizenship. Well, the fact of the matter is that these people who are undocumented, who have American born citizens, they live in the United States. They have been paying taxes in the United States for years and years and years, and they follow the laws of the United States as a matter of fact. So, to reason that they are not under the jurisdiction of the United States simply because they are undocumented negates the factual record of them having lived and been subjected to the laws of the United States, most conspicuously having to pay taxes, whether they be property taxes or any other sales taxes or any other taxes that they have to pay. So that is where I stand on the birthright citizenship, and I wanted to sort of explain that briefly to you. Terminated the legal entry of nearly 1 million migrants under the Biden administration, officially withdrew from the U.S. withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement again, declared an energy emergency, promising to expand fossil fuel drilling and eliminate Biden's electric vehicle mandate. I don't know how that goes on with Elon Musk and that, the car industry and how that's going to play out. Halted federal hiring except for the military and other areas of the government. Froze the implementation of new federal regulations. This is just putting stops to the administrative state as it should run and continues to run, sort of putting a wrench in the continuity of it. Proposed classifying certain federal employees as political appointees, making it easier to terminate them. That's Schedule F that they've talked about. You can see the sort of the murmurs of Project 2025. Empowered the Department of Governmental Efficiency, led by Elon Musk, now that Vivek has been sort of taken out of it, Elon Musk is going to have an office in the White House to recommend cuts to government programs and spending. And just to sort of give you a reference, Elon Musk is the richest man in the world, Donald Trump's largest patron, and the man who just recently sort of tried to mimic the Nazi salute on January 19th before Donald Trump was inaugurated. That man is going to have, he wasn't elected, by the way. Nobody elected him. Nobody gave him sort of a senatorial nomination appointment, because the Department of Governmental Efficiency is not a department under any law of the government of the United States. Then we go to terminated all federal DEI programs and directed a review to identify and end related initiatives. Rolled back transgender protections, declaring the federal government will recognize only two biological sexes, male and female. And it gave a description of what male and female is and biological is, and what it refers to, and this infringement on the freedom and liberty of Americans will be challenged, and it will be brought up in court under the Equal Protection Clause. And I hope that at the end of the day, the Supreme Court finds a way to nullify this order, because obviously it's not going to be everybody that's going to have to enforce the order. This order only applies to federal government officials who are under the power of the presidency and the federal government's jurisdiction of federal laws. So, application of federal policies on federal employees in federal buildings. That's what it's going to impact. It's a huge chunk. It's a sizable chunk of people because the American government is the biggest employer in the United States. We don't think about it like that, but it is, including them if you include the military, and it is essentially going to have a discriminatory policy on the basis of sex and on the basis of identity and on the basis of personhood. So that's just really, and it has these echoes of what happened in Germany in the early days of Nazi rule, and then the paragraph 125 that outright criminalized homosexuality and all other sort of categories of deviancies that they deemed to be deviancies. Mandated segregation in federal prisons, migrant shelters, and rape victim facilities based on biological sex as defined in the order. So that's going to have some impact on, like I just said, prohibited federal funding for gender transition services. He didn't have to do any of these. None of these happen as frequently as they talk about. And these were protections for a protected class, a minority, a disadvantaged class of Americans. And it just seems like echoes of authoritarian fascism on day one. And ended federal prosecution of individual deemed political opponents by Biden's administration. So essentially, anybody who was involved in the election January 6th insurrection and pardoning of this 1,500 individuals convicted or charged, commutations of these people's sentences, pardoning is completely doing away with, taking it off the record and say, you've been pardoned of this crime. Commutation is just letting them off the sentence. They get to get out of prison. It doesn't take away it doesn't give a pardon stamp on it. So they're still convicted felons, but their sentences have been commuted. So, and I said that this was going to happen, and I said that this was going to be Donald Trump's, they helped me out, and now I'm helping them out, and there's nothing anybody can do about it, executive order. And that's what we have here. Then we talk about, then he signed executive order to keep TikTok operating for 75 days. It's an executive order that, talking about a law being enforced cannot be stopped, but it can be temporarily delayed by executive orders. I'm not sure how specific they have to be, but the enforcement branch, the executive branch of the United States, is the branch that enforces the laws. So if the law is not enforced by Donald Trump or whoever the president is, then that law is essentially in abeyance. But Donald Trump can lift that sort of specter over, this influence over TikTok and the social media platforms, saying that, okay, I'll just let you go for 75 days. I may make it illegal, though. I can enforce this anytime. Exits from the World Health Organization. I mean, what could go wrong? It's not like he bungled the last pandemic that killed over 1 million Americans. Sign an executive order to prohibit any federal officer, employee, or agent from unconstitutionally abridging free speech of American citizens. God only knows what that means. And directing the Attorney General to investigate potential violations of free speech during the Biden administration and propose remedial actions. What free speech infringements were there during Biden's? I mean, I can't think of it. But you see that this symbolic gesture of executive orders, he's just throwing them out. Like, Then he goes, designated drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's perhaps the only good one. Then he goes, suspended foreign assistance for 90 days pending reviews, and empowered the Attorney General and directed them to help states get lethal injections to carry out executions that need to happen. I mean, to say that this day one, has been a depraved heart exercise of what Donald Trump's presidency is going to be will be an appropriate understatement. And that's what I wanted to report to you today. And it sounds like a flood because it is a flood. And it is, I mean, let's see how many people talk about all of these. And let's see if the American media really goes into what each of these mean, because they are going to have repercussions in the lives of many, many, many Americans. And mind you, there is no specific executive order for lowering the cost of living other than that symbolic gesture of lowering inflation by the federal regulatory authorities. So, with that said, we wade into the abyss that is Donald Trump's reign. I leave you with this. Stay vigilant and take care of one another. Show kindness to one another. Remain vigilant, because Donald Trump's stand back and stand by troop that he has pardoned, his foot soldiers, his seditious conspirators, they're out on the streets and they're going to reform their militias, and they are going to do everything that Donald Trump dog whistles them to do, because they know now that they can get away with it. Please stay safe.